Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here. Post-Digital Culture Symposium was intended from the beginning as a forum to exchange ideas between artists and thinkers. The title, which is by definition problematic, reflects how ambivalent trying to define the relationship between art and new media can be. By using post, we wanted to trigger a reaction by implying that we were speaking about something happening after the digital or after the internet. But of course, post-digital is only speaking about digital cultures and is very much talking about the present. Originally, the title was chosen as a loose reference to the term post-internet that you might have heard over the last months and years. First, this term was coined by Marisa Olsson in 2007 and popularized by Artie Vierkants, who was one of the speakers last year. Artie wrote an essay called The Image Object Post-Internet. In this text, he defines a problematic yet paradoxical terminology that simultaneously encompasses the medium and its program obsolescence. As a discursive tool, the prefix post is a simple placeholder. We could say that post was attached to internet at the end of the noughties, the same way post was attached to modern at the end of the 50s. Both ambiguous terms, they share a common alienation towards society's relation to reality and a fragmented understanding of culture under multiple layers of representation. The current and accepted ubiquity of the digital and the web, at least I would say in the West, implies that, as Patrick just said before, we have digested, I think, the initial fascination for a medium that can now allow ourselves to focus on its social and political consequences. Still, today, the network society is not anymore a new phenomenon and turns out to be way more complex than expected. In a way, its impact may be more sociological than technologic. And to us, the medium is somehow secondary, as we assume that technologic progress has always happened, will continue to happen, and that we humans will continue to adapt to it. In that sense, we're more interested here to test the validity of the discourses and practices generated around new technologies than questioning the material or media they're made of. And this more philosophical understanding of new media was applied when we initially conceived the Museum of Post-Digital Cultures. Last year, while brainstorming with Federica Martini, who's sitting here next to me, Patrick Doram, who just gave an introduction, Martin Chalvera, who also just gave an introduction, and Thibaut Brevet, who's in the audience and here, and our brilliant web developer. We were trying to think of how we could archive the filmed conferences. In case you don't know, we're being filmed. And somehow, what would be the best way to archive all this material? Together we agreed that it would be problematic to create yet another website displaying content that was inscribed in the past, which is by definition what an archive is. In fact, the web is full of dead online material, as you know. And although that's I guess, an interesting phenomenon, I think, for example, of archive team who saved and made available in 2010 the GeoCities homepage archive. But this is not what we were trying to achieve. I guess what we wanted to avoid was to produce yet another cemetery of content. It didn't seem to make much sense in this context. So thanks or because of the constant and growing use of social media such as Tumblr or Facebook, to name only but a few, we are exposed to a great amount of information, and this has two clear consequences. First, we have to choose what we're looking at, and second, obviously, we spend less time with such information. In that context, generating attention and an audience has become very difficult. So for our museum, the idea was to integrate the film conferences of last year's symposium to an extended open archive of reference material provided by last year's speakers. Somehow we were hoping to complement the conference's linearity with something like a three-dimensional web of knowledge. 3D in the sense that we hope to build a constellation rather than an encyclopedia, something more intuitive and subjective that would reflect how a specialist's knowledge is built.
Together with Elise, we decided to create an online platform where we could present research documents, artworks, and archive materials alike beyond any hierarchies. On the one hand, we wanted to extend the time of the symposium and imagine it not as a final showcase, but as a platform that could house further discussions between the participants in the project and other users. So instead of an exhibition edited down to a final form and then presented to the public, we imagined a digital museum that works similarly to a moderated community-based knowledge platform in the fashion of arg.org and Wikipedia. Sorry. On the one hand, in an open source spirit, we wanted to make public all the materials encountered during the Post-Digital Cultures project, and not only the final products such as the conferences and exhibitions. Our idea of interface was one that would enable us to map out also micro-histories and informal knowledge related to the whole process, like a cloud, a Google map, or a Bubble Byte. As the title of our talk suggests, we had in mind the model of the Cabinet of Curiosity, not as a pure display site, but as a working space and a shared studio situation. Furthermore, the cabinet appealed to us also for its non-linear presentation of knowledge, where the unusual sits next to the familiar with no particular underlying logics. And it is also in this conceptual sense that the cabinet is the ancestor of the museum before Enlightenment classifications and rationalization introduced hierarchies in its poetic accumulations. In this sense, our choice to call the project a museum is, of course, as Patrick mentioned before, an ironic and playful contradiction. We imagine an online immaterial platform that could evolve over time and that, differently from real museums, does not house original and unique artworks, and for this reason can get rid of its collections on a regular basis. The site works at different speeds, as it accelerates or slows down according to the events it hosts, such as the symposium that is taking place now, and the exhibitions proposed by the guest curators in the past year. After 1 year of existence, the Post-Digital Culture Museum seems to us virtual on two levels. It holds a collection of intangible objects, and as such, it works as an abstract representation of the idea of museum. On the other hand, as a digital platform, the Post-Digital Museum is not characterized by an ensemble of artifacts, but by a list of links and references in the form of a curated Google search. Somehow, eco-infreakonomics, where accidental collections of randomly arranged information allows to understand the impact of complex social interactions. Today, an online exhibition naturally produces fringes of unexpected connections and knowledge, most of them ephemeral. In this sense, the Post-Digital Culture Museum plays an ambiguous role, as it may appear as a Web 2.0 reenactment of 1990s online net art exhibitions. And it is true that the project implies in a quite straightforward way a reflection on if and how historical new media net art has been preserved and whether doing that makes sense at all. At the same time, the paradox in this history lies precisely in the fact that, with a few relevant exceptions, most museums have failed to collect media art in depth, as reminds Los Angeles funding curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art, Julie Lazare. Those omissions, continues Lazare, hinder curators and artists' ability to formulate historical exhibitions because they lack the tools and the art necessary for retrospection and introspection. For these reasons, the preservation of artwork may continue to be the key role for museums. End of quote. In this statement, Lazare raises questions about the preservation of new media artworks, assuming that they may exist aloof from their network of references. On the other side, the Post-Digital Cultures Museum is purely made of references, networks, and meta-information, raw materials that may indeed be as essential as the digital artwork itself in the attempt of preserving digital cultural items.
So, recycling the classical museum's vocabulary, we started the collection with donations from 2013 speakers and ourselves. Then the museum collection was open to a circle of international collaborators whom had shown interest in the initiative. And finally, the collection kept growing through it kept growing through additional donation made by guest curators that were invited over the course of last year to grow the collection and curate online exhibition on the Museum of Post-Digital Culture. So one might wonder why mimic the structure and use the name of one of the oldest institutions and adapt it to an online format. And this brings the question back to the immaterial, I guess. But the Museum of Post-Digital Culture is actually anything but an adaptation of it. In fact, we noticed that each guest curator took the opportunity of this alternative exhibiting platform to experiment with new curatorial approaches. And those approaches actually all challenge the traditional formats of presenting art. The first curator was Paul Feigelfeld, who's sitting here in the first row. Paul's exhibition reflected a very personal network and was something like a self-portrait, a subtle mix that would explore the history of media discourse and try to illustrate some key ideas with contemporary artworks, including existing and commissioned works that were selected out of Paul's closest art network, such as, for example, Yuri Pattison's Reliable Communications Project. Yuri is also sitting here in the front row and will speak tomorrow. Or another example would be Friedrich Kittler, some of Friedrich Kittler's historical text with his historical figure with whom Paul has worked closely. The second exhibition, sorry. Yeah, Fede is going to introduce the second one, sorry.
We can stay close, stay. The second exhibition, titled The Ship of Fools, was co-curated by Peter Vermeulen, who may also already be here in the audience. Yeah. Anyways, hello. Hey, going to join the discussion. Peter worked together with Christoph Claris on a proposal focused on utopian and dystopian visions of technology-based societies. And they followed a deliberately chronological approach, very close to the temporality that works in the internet. And juxtaposing their exhibition, Plato with Marshall McLuhan, Ulysses to Foucault, passing through countercultural positions within and outside the visual arts and digital cultures.
Finally, third exhibition we had last year was curated by Karen Archie, who's just here and who's going to speak this afternoon. And Karen proposed an exhibition titled The Cyborg and the Moon, Notes on Science Fiction. Her exhibition was a collection of artistic and historical items that meant to explore how time and our relationship to it is presented in science fiction, and especially how imagining the future allows strong comment on the political.
So the museum is currently displayed on a hidden urn. We said before that we work at different speed, so as we are now working together live for 2 days. The site is on a hidden URL, and it will be made public again after the conferences. And we will start with an exhibition curated by Simon Immelsbach, director of the Haus für Elektronische Kunst in Basel, and Alexandra Adler, who is assistant curator in the same institution. The title of the proposal is Imaginary Futures in Digital Space, and the exhibition will be launched shortly after the symposium. So, just before we finish together with Elise, we would like to warmly thank all the artists, curators, speakers, and friends who contributed to feed the platform in the last year. And thank you for your attention. We hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium.